animal moves that led to two viable human deaths. The debate can begin!
First off, at the beginning of the book, we know that Lenny likes soft things and pets them. Because of this, he likes to pet mice. Lenny is very strong, so he kills the mice every time. This shows that he should not be trusted handling these creatures. He gets a dog that is supposedly stronger so it can withstand his strength, but he kills that too. Then he pets the hair of Curly's wife. He is too rough and snaps her neck. This death leads to Lenny being killed by George, which didn't have to happen either. These deaths could have been avoided if Lenny would just be barred from handling these creatures from the start, because it was shown that he can't be trusted with them.
Lenny has a disability, so he does these things without thinking. He acts on his impulses and is unaware of his own strength. Just saying no won't do much. How could you say no when he doesn't even ask to touch in the first place? In the beginning of the book, it took a tremendous amount of effort from George to take the dead mouse from Lenny. Lenny wanted that mouse, so he hid it because he knew George would take it from him. Next, they were ran out of weed because Lenny grabbed a woman's dress without asking because it looked soft, and that was mistaken for sexual assault. You could just say no to Lenny because he just does what he wants.
Objection!
The fact that Lenny just does what he wants and doesn't ask first before touching things when he knows he will get in trouble for it is a huge sign that he should have been supervised better. Also, it's not just about asking for permission. Lenny can and should be trained to have some sort of self-control, because clearly he is loyal to George and he is shown to follow his directions.
Trained like a dog seems kinda sus. Bro literally has a mental disability.
There are times in the book where Lenny does have control of his strength and does listen to George. Think back to when Curly was taking out his temper on Lenny. He just stood there and took it. It was until George yelled at Lenny to attack. Lenny completely crushed Curly's hand because of George's command.
Now you are missing some context. He put up with it until George told Lenny not to, but it wasn't a flip of a switch. Lenny wasn't activated. This isn't of Mice and MK Ultra.
Objection!
Do you even know what MK Ultra was? Because it wasn't that.
Don't care, didn't ask.
What?
My point was that Lenny didn't immediately attack. It took a while for Lenny to listen to George screaming, crying for George to save him.
Okay, but he still acted under George's command. Anyways, back to my other point. Lenny is a walking liability and should be supervised at all times.
George is just one person. He can't watch Lenny 24/7. It's just not realistic.
Doesn't it have to be just George's responsibility? He could have asked for help, or at least informed others of the danger that Lenny may bring.
The book takes place in the 1930s. People with disabilities like Lenny were considered subhuman for their behavior and low value in the workplace. Nobody would take on that obligation like George, and openly admitting the issues that Lenny could bring would immediately put both Lenny and George in danger. It was already hard enough to get a job while George was protecting Lenny. What you're suggesting would be near impossible for the time period.
Slim and Candy were pretty nice people. I don't see why George couldn't have asked them.
Again, the time period and how the disabled were treated. The risk was too high for George. He probably didn't feel that Lenny would be safe under the supervision of anybody other than himself. They just got out of the situation in weed, emphasizing that with one wrong move, Lenny is done for. It would take years of forming a relationship for George to allow Lenny to be trusted in the hands of someone else.
One wrong move and Lenny is done for. Do you mean like with what happened with Curly's wife? Because that is exactly what happened. This is what happened when George chooses no supervision over the supervision. He is too paranoid to allow.
I was talking about a misunderstanding that could put Lenny in danger.
Well, it's still something that is important to bring up, because Lenny should have let go of her hair when Curly's wife started screaming. Yes, I'm well aware that she wasn't aware of Lenny's history, but she should have been.
Objection!
Again, George couldn't have released that info to her because Lenny would have been demonized and treated as a threat and malfunctioning machinery rather than a person.
Okay, but when she was screaming, Lenny should have just let go, right? Lenny knew that something was wrong.
Well, when the mice or the dog Lenny was petting would try to escape because of being uncomfortable by the force being used, Lenny would overreact and overcorrect, killing the animal because he knew if someone heard or saw that he would have gotten in trouble.
Objection!
Lenny knew he would have gotten in trouble. That means he knew it was bad, right?
That is actually the opposite of the case. Lenny knew the cause and effect relationship of the reaction of the animal or person and him getting in trouble, but not the cause and effect relationship of the aggressiveness of his petting and the reaction of the being he was petting. In other words, he knew that their reaction was bad, but not that his petting was bad or that the petting is what caused the reaction in the first place. Lenny knew that he would get in trouble for making Curly's wife yell at him, but he didn't know why she was yelling. So Lenny knew that he needed her to stop screaming, but since he didn't know the cause of her screaming, he panicked and felt like his only choice was to stop her physically. Lenny already doesn't have much awareness of the amount of force he uses, and because he was already in a panicked state, he ended up using too much and killed her. Completely by accident. Yes, Lenny was afraid of trouble and tried to avoid it, but he didn't understand the layers to the situation.
But if Lenny knew that it was trouble, he should have still stopped.
As I stated before, he did, but in the only way he knew how to. Lenny thought her screaming was the bad thing and nothing else, so he didn't think to just let go of her hair. This caused him to stop the screaming by muffling it, not realizing that it was far from the correct move. Lenny did not know that lowering his force would stop the screaming because he didn't know why she was screaming.
Well, something like this was destined to happen. It's George's fault for putting Lenny in this situation.
Well, as we said before, George did not trust anyone else with looking over or supervising Lenny due to a safety concern.
Objection!
George should have spent the time to meet someone that could be trusted with Lenny instead of dragging him into a job that would put Lenny in danger.
He's so first again, it would be really hard to find someone who would treat Lenny as human if they knew the extent of his disability because of how the disabled was viewed and treated. Also, George promised Aunt Claire that he would take care of Lenny, and George wants to keep that promise.
Objection!
That doesn't mean that George should be obligated to be Lenny's sole provider. Take care of Lenny means to keep him safe, which can be done in other ways. I know George went to find a life for him and Lenny during the Great Depression by finding work, but that just puts Lenny in even more danger, as we have been shown in the book. The time period was horrible for the disabled population, but there has to be some good people that would be willing to care for Lenny with love and kindness like how George does. George can even have Lenny moving with him after he's made enough money and is pretty well off. Putting Lenny in the workforce whilst knowing that he can't get the extra support that Lenny needs just doesn't seem safe and isn't a responsible decision.
That is actually a really good point because that is a route that George could have taken and it probably would have effectively prevented the issues that they faced in the novel. On the other hand, you can't really blame George for not going that route.
Why not?
It's because finding that good person is a very difficult thing to do, and it has always just been him and Lenny as a duo. To find that person or those people may have not even crossed his mind. Another thing to consider is that those people may have treated Lenny well in front of George and others, but there's no way to know how they would act behind closed doors. Think of the abuse that happens in elderly care residencies and how common it is. Also, how would George be able to know if these people would be able to handle the stress that comes with caring for Lenny? How would it affect their mental state? George is a good guy and just wants the best for Lenny, but doesn't want someone else's enjoyment of life to be immensely decreased for it.
Also, that death was the cause of the second death. Lenny.
Objection!
That death was the greater of two evils. It was either a quick and painless death or being tortured to death.
Okay.
Okay?
I don't know, man. I ran out of points to make.
That's quite unprofessional of you.
Indeed.
So is that it?
Now it is time for jury deliberation. The jury has voted the defendant guilty.
Blushing emoji.
Leave absolutely base. If
Kill yourself.